Apparently, Rachel Reeves is on the cusp of highlighting the rising hotel bill for asylum seekers, potentially reaching up to £10 billion pounds a year, is a key financial pressure explaining the black hole. And this revelation comes from her speech, which is due soon, detailing an audit on public spending about what happened in the Conservative government and what Labour is able to deduce after it assumed office. The audit suggests a significant £19 billion black hole in public finances, with asylum support costs forecasted to increase sharply. Conservatives and think tanks have accused Labour of exaggerating the financial situation to justify future tax cuts. And particularly Jeremy Hunt has said that he's left the economy in a better position than it was when the Conservatives inherited the economy from the Labour Party 14 years ago. I think this might be over-egging the omelette, but the Home Office's revised estimates show a stark increase in asylum accommodation costs, much higher than was previously thought. In other words, much of the problem stems, as I've said all along really, from Priti Patel, Suella Braverman, James Cleverly, Theresa May and the management of the Home Office. The current daily expenditure on hotels for asylum seekers apparently is £8 million, translating to £3 billion annually, but the new projections significantly exceed these figures. Labour criticises the previous Conservative government for the uncontrolled rise in asylum accommodation costs. And part of this is the hostile environment, which effectively is a waving of a flag to go slow in processing claims. Surely now the Home Office needs to get its finger out and start doing the work that it's paid to do, without distractions. It's outrageous and unfair and unreasonable to be keeping so many would-be asylum seekers in limbo simply because of an ideology. During the election campaign, the Conservatives criticised Labour's lack of a detailed plan to stop the small boats crossing. The small boats are a minor issue compared to the overflowing hotels. And the Prime Minister has dismissed the previous government's Rwanda deportation plan, focusing instead on dismantling smuggling gangs, which indeed was part of the plan put forward by Priti Patel and by Suella Braverman. But their approach was to punish the victims of smuggling rather than to put all the weight on identifying and finding the smugglers. I'm afraid identifying smugglers is a little bit like identifying and pursuing drug runners. There are so many of them, and the lure of profit is so enormous that simply by increasing the police force or the task force to search them out, that's not going to do much more than pick off the occasional aberrant smuggler who makes a mistake. I think much better is to find a different way to maintain order and to bypass the smuggling operations entirely. And that means something like setting up consular access on the north coast of France so that people no longer feel duty-bound to cross the channel. You remember on the 22nd of November 2022, when Suella Braverman was being questioned in a Commons committee by Tim Lawton, that she admitted that the only way to claim asylum was to cross the channel and then make a claim on the other side. Within a few days, her 3 laws came into effect, which made even that process ridiculous. But nevertheless, she conceded and she acknowledged that there were no safe and legal routes, or there weren't enough safe and legal routes to allow people, for example, from Africa to claim asylum in the UK, even if their grounds for asylum was reasonable, was good, except by crossing the Channel. So part of her approach was to acknowledge that crossing the Channel was a necessity. We need to make it an absurdity, not a necessity, an absurdity. Because making something illegal or making something more dangerous, suggesting something as a deterrent, is not a deterrent to people who have already risked their lives. We need to make it absurd and ridiculous and unnecessary. And that means starting the process elsewhere. I think it also means that we need to redraft, revise, revisit the 1951 Refugee Convention. And we need to ask whether or not our definition of asylum and a refugee are correct, whether these two definitions are correct and are suitable for the modern age. I don't think we should necessarily be looking at making a distinction between an asylum seeker and an economic migrant, which is the distinction that has grown up recently in language, if not in law. Also, I don't think I think we should be very clear that an illegal migrant is somebody who has been rejected by the system, not somebody who has come here by an illegal route. As again, Suella Braverman made clear, even if somebody comes to the UK by an illegal route, their attempt to claim asylum when they reach the UK automatically legalizes them, automatically puts them in a position where where their case must be examined. If the case is then rejected, then they become an illegal migrant. Of course, this situation is now queered by the three laws of Suella Braverman, the illegal migration law, the borders law, and the Rwanda law. The last one, of course, was post-Suella Braverman, but it has her spirit, it has her vicious identity stamped all over it. We need to, I think the Labour Party needs to repeal all three of those laws with some urgency, because they throw into doubt the continued status of refugees in Britain, and particularly the status of those who came here after 2022. And that needs to be changed. Otherwise, we are giving asylum to people who have no right to it in law. So I'm sure Keir Starmer is well aware of the need to sort that out. Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, has criticised the financial legacy left by the Conservatives, suggesting that it would be cheaper to house asylum seekers in the Ritz. Economists and political analysts argue that the poor state of public finances should not be a surprise, pointing to the long-standing underperformance of public services and infrastructure. And this context has sparked debates about the true extent of the fiscal challenges facing the new government and the potential need for tax increases.